So the really cool thing about working inside Microsoft 365 now is you don't really have to determine whether or not you need to go out and buy a physical computer or just subscribe to a computer in the cloud. And what do I mean by that? Well, right now you're looking at my screen and I'm using a Windows 11 PC. I've got my browser open, I've got my Microsoft Edge running, I've got my File Explorer, and all of those things there. But what if I needed to access my computer elsewhere? Or what if I wanted to use my Samsung Galaxy Tab or iPad as my computer? Or if I already had something like a Chromebook and I wanted to start using Windows without having to go out and buy a Windows laptop, I can simply open up my site here, click on Windows 365, and that's going to actually use any Chromium-based browser, preferably Edge, because it's obviously performance tweaked being a Microsoft product, but you can do this on any Chromium-based browser. So here I can see that I've been assigned a computer, and this is my own personal static computer that lives in Microsoft's data centers and is governed and adheres to the same regulatory compliance and the same visibility that your IT already has into your physical devices. They'll be able to have that same granularity and management over these types of devices here. So right off the bat, I can see what operating system I have, what my specs are at a very high level. So I've got 4 cores, I've got 16 gigs of RAM and 128 gig storage. I've also got some opportunities here to troubleshoot the PC and run some self-repair features. Maybe, and this doesn't happen often, but maybe the network is being funny or I can't get into it or something like that. I don't have to worry about calling IT for that. I can actually troubleshoot and run through a diagnostic, and my IT will actually be kept in the loop on what happened to remediate those problems. I also have other options like system information, so I can see my device name. So if your IT guy ever asks you, hey, what's the computer name you're working on because I want to look that up, this is where you can find that information. Same as if you were to go into your Windows device settings. What we have here on the left-hand side is a little down arrow, and this is where we have another option to access our PC. Let me come back to this because I want to talk about platforms in just a minute, but I'm going to go ahead now and just open my static computer in the browser. And notice how I have this Windows 11 computer, surrounding the edges here. This is my physical computer that I'm actually on, but now I'm also starting up this other computer right within the browser. And because I'm doing it within the browser, it's using my single sign-on, so it already knows what account I'm using right inside my work account. So it knows my ID, it knows my password, because I'm already on a Microsoft secured machine. So I can now hit sign in. If for any reason it did not pre-fill that information, you would just sign in with your Microsoft email and password that has that license assigned, just like you do for your email or for Teams or for anything else. Now in my browser window here, I'm literally using a computer within a computer. So I've got a fully independent Windows 11 machine that has all the same software, all the same tools, and is running off a Microsoft hosted network right in the cloud. So if I open up File Explorer, for example, I've still got all my favorites. I've got all my mapped SharePoint drives. I've got my OneDrive. It literally is my computer that follows me anywhere. Something fun I usually do with this is if I'm, relaxing for the evening, or if I have to follow up on an email migration, or if I need to do some paperwork really quickly or verify some things, especially on Fridays and Saturdays when I'm closing out my work week, I can actually just take my Galaxy phone out. I can take my iPhone out, especially if you have a foldable device, and I can pull up this PC on that phone. So that brings me back to the other ways I can access it. So we looked at accessing it from within a Chromium browser, but let's close this out and let's actually take a look at some of these options here under the download section. So there are native applications to run this on all of your devices, whether you're using Windows, Mac, iOS, or Android. So this could be on any form factor that you'd like. And of course, if we're managing the device, if Resolve was actually deploying applications, then a lot of these things can be set up automatically and deployed, so you don't even have to worry about doing this. What I wanted to bring you here for, though, is something called the subscription URL. So once you download the remote desktop application for the corresponding platform, which is already right here on my taskbar, and we'll come back to this in just a second. But once you download it, it's going to say, okay, you have to sign in. When you go to sign in, you wouldn't sign in with your Microsoft account right away. It's going to ask you for a subscription URL, right? So where do you generate that subscription URL? Back on this page here, notice how there's the option to get subscription URL for whichever platform you're connecting on. And you only have to do this once, right? So when you hit get subscription URL, you copy that link, you would paste that into the welcome screen of the remote desktop app. Then it will sign you in with your Microsoft account, and forevermore, it will always bring you to this screen when you open it. And the reason we have to do this is because maybe you're an individual that's going to get multiple different PCs for different functions in your organization. So you might not just have one PC. Maybe you have one PC for this, another PC for that, another PC on another network, right? So this might start aggregating all of your computers together. But for simplicity, let's just go ahead and connect to our one cloud PC here. So I'm going to double click. And then what you'll notice, you might not be able to see it because it might be coming up on a separate screen here, but if you're actually connecting via the remote desktop app, it is actually signing me in with Windows Hello. So if you have a device with facial recognition, with fingerprint authentication, it will actually just take your face or fingerprint. You will not have to type in your Microsoft 365 password. And that's one of the benefits of using the local application versus the browser-based version. So now it's loading up. It's going to pop up here for us in just a second. And now we're in our full screen Windows 365 PC using that very familiar remote desktop application for anyone that's ever used a remote PC before. And again, this would work on Windows, on Mac, on iOS, Android, whichever platform you want. The really cool thing about this is if I go into my remote PC, not only does it feel like I'm using a local computer on this monitor, but I'm actually able to get to all of my local drives as well on my physical PC. So if I'm using the remote desktop application, I can get to any map drives, mapped printers, network shares, just by using the File Explorer right inside of Windows. So it really does truly act and feel as that static computer in the cloud that belongs to you and follows you everywhere. Brian.
Yes, David, sorry to interrupt. As far as one of the concerns people have with this newer technology, right? Well, it's not that new; it's been around for a few years, but this specific version of VDI, is speed, right? Like we saw that came up fairly fast. What type of license are you using here, or what options do they have in terms of processor and memory speed to?
That's a great question. Let's actually take a look at some of our Windows 365 pricing options. Before we do that, let me talk about speed for a minute, because speed is something, and when we talk about speed, we know that the computer is going to work fast. It's a 16 gig machine. It's a quad core. It's got the latest Intel chips. Like, that's not a problem. But let's talk about bandwidth for a minute, because that's what I really like to focus on when it comes to speed. So let me just do a speed test, one of our favorite tools. And let's go into here. And remember, this is my remote PC that's working off Microsoft's data servers. You can actually see that I'm connected to Microsoft Azure, and I'm working in a data center that's connecting to Fairfax, Virginia. So I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, but because I'm using my remote PC, another thing to point out is notice how it's intelligent enough to pick up the weather near me. It's not showing me a different weather report. It's picking up my time and all those fun things. So let me hit go on this speed test and just get an idea of what to expect from these cloud PCs. So we're already looking at over a gig down right off the bat. And what this is great for is, imagine if you're in an area where you can't subscribe to gig speed at home. You can't get those high-speed broadband connections. Well, to emulate a computer in the cloud, which means to display it, we're also at a gig up too, or even over a gig up, which is excellent. To emulate a computer at home or use a remote desktop, you really only need about a 12 megabyte per second connection. Once you're on the computer, all that heavy lifting is going to be done by this PC, and you're essentially just streaming this computer to your own device. So what I like to tell people is, if you can run Netflix at home, then you can run these PCs at home, and you're going to actually get these kinds of speeds because all the workload is being done by the remote PC and not by your physical device.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's a key point right there. Basically, you're saying even if you're out in a rural area and using DSL, for example, you could still get by
Exactly.
because the
Exactly.
data lives on the servers, the
Yep.
Microsoft servers themselves, rather than
Exactly. Yep.
being passed back and forth.
Yep. Absolutely. So then it comes down to how do you want to configure your PC, right? So let's actually go into our admin center and let's take a look at some of our licensing options. I mentioned earlier that the business version of Windows 365 and the enterprise version are actually priced in parity. So there's no difference in the SKU cost. So Windows 365 business with a 2 gig, 128 gig hard drive is going to cost the same as enterprise. The difference at this stage in the game, and this is going to change next spring because they're bringing those more into parity. But the difference today is that enterprise allows your IT administrator to do the co-management with Intune, whereas business is going to be that self-subscribe for that sole proprietor that doesn't have anyone to help them with IT. All right. So let's jump down into billing and then purchase services. And this, we're just doing this in our Microsoft Admin Center. So anybody that has access to this should be able to see it. There's also tons of product pages if you go to, look up the cost of Windows 365. But to see all the options, I'm just going to choose Windows 365 here. And because we're not dealing so much with business, I'm just going to jump into the enterprise details. Because again, they really are in parity in terms of cost, but we want to work mostly in enterprise since we're going to be helping you manage these things. And notice the pricing grid here. So this is essentially where you get into choosing, how much beef do you need on this system? How many specifications? How much RAM do you want? What kind of workloads are you going to be doing on it? And this is where you get the grid of, okay, for 4 gigs of RAM and a 64 gig hard drive, that'll be a static cost of $28 per user per month that needs a PC like that. So if you have a first line worker that's just going out there to do data entry, maybe use their old Chromebook as a Windows PC now, you don't need to rush to Best Buy or rush to Apple to buy them an expensive computer. You could just add this license to them and have them sign in via the browser.
I could really see this as a awesome tool for remote work, or if we had to go into lockdown again, right? Like it's easy to provision these
Absolutely.
to
Yep.
remote workers, right?
It's literally assign the license, Brian, and then within 10 to 20 minutes, that computer is available for that end user to sign in. As long as they can sign into Outlook, then they can sign into their computer, Windows 365.
Awesome.
Perfect. Any other questions or thoughts on this? I mean, there are so many use cases. There are so many ways to monitor and manage. Some people may ask, okay, well, how do we track and monitor all these cloud PCs? I actually have several in my organization. So I'll go into devices and I'll go into my Windows devices here. So this is just a list of all my devices in Microsoft Endpoint Manager. If some of you that are seeing this aren't really IT centric or IT management, this is essentially where we make sure your devices are working as expected. You'll notice that in this list, we do have, the names of our computers. So I'm on my desktop right now. Eric's got his laptop, but we also have these with the prefix CPC. And these are our cloud PCs. And that's every cloud PC you get is going to inherit that prefix. And then it's going to automatically have the name of the assigned user and then some randomly generated suffix to basically make it unique. So if I go into my cloud PC here, I have the same type of visibility into this and controls as I would with any other physical computer. I can run antivirus scans. I can see user experience. I can see how long it takes to boot. I can look at network statistics and heuristics, any type of report or error codes I want to see. And what's really awesome is I can come in here and actually say, hey, if there was an issue or an update or someone installed something on their cloud PC, I could come in here and actually restore up to a month's versions without adding any additional backup to what that image was on that date and time.
So quick question, David, ransomware situation, would that be a good way to dial it back?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be a great restore. Of course, just like any device connected to Intune, you could simply reprovision it, or on a physical device, it would be called an autopilot reset. Since based on these policies, everyone's data is automatically going to be backed up to either OneDrive or SharePoint, If you get hit with ransomware or something like that, we don't need to worry that much. All we need to do is just re-provision or do an autopilot reset, and that machine will come back to its last healthy state. And remember that all of your documents have actually been stored to OneDrive or SharePoint, so it's not like we need to worry about doing a data backup before taking that action.
That's a beautiful thing.
It is.
Okay, if you don't mind, Chris, did you have any questions? Because I want to be cognizant of David's time here.
Yeah, no. So when you said I heard you specify that it had to be a Chromium browser. So would something like Firefox and I don't know, Brave?
Not yet. Yep. And there are reasons for that. Of course, Microsoft, when they first came out with Windows 10 in 2015, they did this whole push on the new Microsoft Edge, right? Or Microsoft Edge. And then it went through all of these changes. And ultimately, Microsoft said, you know what? Chrome did the web really well. Let's take what they did really well, which is open source, and let's make it the most secure browser. So now that Chrome and Edge work on the same platform, and the Chromium engine is used in about 92% of the world in terms of web browsing now, you know, rest in peace, Internet Explorer, and Netscape for my 90s fans out there. But anything with the Chromium is really sure to work. And there is more support coming for things like Firefox and Opera. But since they run different engines, we are just seeing, for example, Chris, in January, Firefox will be able to use the full screen sharing and recording capabilities for Microsoft Teams. But Microsoft has really gotten into bed with Chromium on all these things. So we usually want to make sure we're using either Edge or Chrome.
Okay.
Chris, did you have one more? Or are you good?
So could you maybe go on about the security benefits of using something?
Absolutely. So just like all of your other stuff, all of your other devices in here. So if I look at my, computers, I've got, tons of machines in here that are used all over the country, some even all over the world. The benefit of having your cloud PCs inside your same endpoint management system as the rest of your fleet of devices is that they adhere to the same security practices as the rest of your organization. So what do I mean by that? I mean that whether they're using their cloud PC or their physical PC, we know that antivirus is configured the same way. We know that they're going to get the same level of scrutiny, no matter if they're using a VPN, not using a VPN, whether they're logging in from Europe or East Asia or the United States. It really doesn't matter where that is. And the beauty of all this type of stuff is because we're using Microsoft 365, it's all going to aggregate for our security and our IT admins right inside the Microsoft Defender portal. So we're going to be able to see alerts, software updates, statistics, security score information, vulnerabilities that might arise. So again, basically the same level of scrutiny that would fall on your physical devices will in turn propagate down to your cloud PCs too.
And of course, Microsoft just keeps adding more features to these different dashboards. So
that's right.
It's hard for for everybody to keep up, but
that's right.
That's only a beautiful thing as far as reaching into the endpoint like that, like you're showing on the screen, is super helpful, because the old way of doing things, we didn't have that much insight.
Right. And something else that's really important about security that a lot of people often overlook when talking about VDI or cloud PCs in general, because Windows 365 Enterprise is so heavily integrated into your endpoint manager strategy that you're already doing with physical computers, keep in mind that all of your conditional access rules also apply to those machines. So if you have a policy set that you can only have people sign in from within the United States or within Canada or wherever it might be, those are also going to apply to your cloud PCs. Or maybe you're in a position where you would say, hey, these 3 employees I've contracted out, they're working out in the Philippines and I have my headquarters in California. So I want only these 3 to be able to use it in this location, but the rest of them should only be in the US. That's the type of granularity that you can really experience with these cloud PCs.
Great point, David. Hey, I want to be respectful of your time and let you go on your way. Thanks again. We appreciate your partnership and look forward to doing another webinar in the future.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time to spend with me.
All right.
Good seeing you again, David.